Welcome to Influencer Marketing. This is a webinar designed for marketers to help you understand what influencer marketing is all about, but also really importantly, what it isn't, because I think there's a lot of misconception and a lot of misunderstanding as to kind of exactly what influencer marketing is. So I'm going to hopefully clarify some of the opportunities and hopefully get us through some of the potential pitfalls as well as we go through this particular session, because if you can get this right here, right now, it feels like this is a big opportunity for marketers. But also, if you kind of misinterpret what this is all about, then you can miss a trick. So that's what we're going to be focusing on here, is how to leverage this opportunity, but hopefully not fall into too many traps. So what is an influencer? Well, let's start by getting some definitions together, because it's a very important starting point to really understand what we mean by influencer. Because a lot of the time we can really come at this from a perspective that is hugely relevant to the kind of strategies and tactics and marketing activities that we're doing. So it's important to align what we mean by influencer with the kinds of plans that we have, so that we can get this alignment really precise and appropriate. So an influencer is an individual who's gained a substantial following, probably on social media platforms, in communities, maybe through their blogs or other digital channels. But importantly, and this is the really key behind the word, is that they have the power to affect opinions, preferences, and potentially purchasing decisions of their audience. Okay, so that's the key. The key is in the word influencer. So often they have what you might term expertise, credibility, or a particular perspective that could be quite unique to them in a specific niche or industry. And by the very nature of that, it helps them to establish trust and authority amongst the people they're influencing. Now, you might think, well, yeah, obviously, Neil, but it's really important at this stage to kind of really clarify that, because there are so many people you could think of as influencers, whereas actually they're not necessarily particularly strong on the whole expertise. They might have a large following, but are they credible? Are they trustworthy, even though they might be quite noisy? So there's a lot of considerations to take here, and that's what we're going to delve deeply into in this session. So brands or organizations that will collaborate with influence can use this leverage to kind of reach a new audience, if you like, or they might deepen the relationship that they have with this audience, or they might use the influencer to kind of influence, the introduction maybe of a new product or service, or potentially bring their messages in an authentic or kind of relatable way to that particular community. And this is in comparison to the more direct approaches that don't include influencers, things like advertising, direct marketing, and, owned social media. So kind of promoting things through your own channels. So this is very much seeing the influencer as a trusted ally, if you like, a third party who can work in partnership with you, potentially, if you can get this right. Now, again, part of the definition of influencer is to understand when you're starting to think about this, because this might sound instantly attractive to you. You might think, okay, influencer marketing sounds good, means I can tap into an audience that I potentially otherwise can't get to. So sounds good on the face of it. But then we also have to think that influencers come in 4 different types, or 4 different kind of levels, if you like. Now, there's a nano, a micro, a macro, and a mega level here. So starting at the very largest here, the mega influencer. Now, these have potentially massive followings. They're probably operating internationally. If you were to look to associate your brand or your product and service with them, it could be potentially advantageous to you, but it could also be very expensive, just because of the sheer scale on which you're operating. And often mega influencers will be operating as a brand in their own right. So they have huge influence over very large potential followings. I'm not going to use the word community here, because this is potentially a difference. And often when we think of influencers, we do think of the big household names, if you like. Next level down, we're talking at the macro level. So a macro influencer will have probably a large following, probably larger than we would have as an individual brand potentially, maybe operating at a national level rather than the international level for a mega influencer, but the macro influencer has a significant following. Okay, so they're well known in a particular region or particular country. They might be well known or associated with certain types of lifestyle or brands or products or services. So you kind of know who they are, and most people would have probably heard of them. Now, again, you might think, well, okay, potentially that's quite interesting. But again, these are, they're broad brush. This is kind of, if you were thinking in a direct marketing sense, this would be very scattergun rather than really targeted and focused. So the next level down, and this for me is where, from an influencer marketing perspective, where it starts to get interesting, is at the micro level. Okay, so we've had mega, macro, and now we're going to micro level. Now, these micro influencers are sector specific. So they have not necessarily a large following, but a smaller, but generally hugely engaged community. So they have a following, but it's more of a community. And because they're sector or industry specific, they become well known in that particular sector or industry, and just by the very nature become a significant kind of share of voice, if you like. So they have, they have an instant sort of credibility, if you like, because they are potentially thought leaders. They are quite influential in terms of shaping the narrative within that sector. So these micro level influencers, I'm going to come on to this phrase again in a minute, could be significant to you. Then at the very, very base level, and not insignificant for many of us, are what we would call nano influencers. Now, these are people who you have direct relationships or direct connections with. So these could be colleagues, could be family, could be friends. Now, don't overlook the nano influencer, because they're very easy to contact. They're good connections. They will potentially sort of expand and scale up the reach of, for example, excuse me, for example, a social media post. So if you're you're posting, for example, on your company page in a particular social network, your nano influencers can 10x, 20x, 30x, even more than that, the reach of a particular post or a particular message, if you allow them to share those posts around with their connections and their contacts. So nano influencers, often overlooked here. A lot of brand marketers will be going straight for the micro influencer because they're the more obvious ones. But remember, some of these nano influencers have got the target audience that you're looking to communicate with. So don't overlook them. So you've got mega, macro, micro, nano. And for different reasons, for different strategies, for different marketing approaches, each one of those may have a value to you. But I'm going to really focus on this session towards the micro and nano influencers, because they are probably more attainable for most of us. They're certainly more reachable, and they probably are more aligned with the kinds of things that we're doing. So what are the kind of roles that a marketing influencer would have for you, and kind of some of the reasons why you'd want to engage with them? Well, I'm going to identify 6 key roles here, because I think these are the things that you can start to build your marketing influencer marketing strategies around. So first one is brand ambassador. They can be, if you can get into a good solid relationship with them, they can be a strong ambassador for your brand. So they can take a consistent series of messages over a period of time and represent you. And if there's a real kind of alignment and affiliation between the two of you, so their brand and your brand, their community and what you're looking to say, then having an influencer as a brand ambassador can be a really, really good way of establishing a good connection and foothold in a community. They can also be content creators. Often they'll have a certain style, and we'll talk about kind of tone of voice and who owns the IP of messages and stuff in just a minute. But, just thinking of them as content creators, I mean, they can do a lot of the work for you. And of course, they know the tone of voice and style of their particular community. So this might be a win-win because it gives them a little bit of leverage, a little bit of flexibility, whereas it actually allows you to then sort of, give away some of the ownership of having to do the content creation. Let them do it. Third point is opinion leadership. So they can help you to become a thought leader in a particular sector. And particularly if you have a content strategy and you have a product or service that relates to a particular community, they can help you shape and form how you're going to play that out in that community or that sector. They can also perform the role of social media strategists. Often, if they are very, very well established and have a really strong foothold in a particular community, good, strong following, lots of high levels of engagement, they can teach you a lot about the social networks that they're active in. And often, because they're literally playing in those spaces on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis, often, they probably know more about the particular social networks than you do. So again, you can leverage that kind of both influence, but also knowledge and expertise as part of your influencer marketing plans. They can, of course, be product or service reviewers. So, you can pass on, particular products or service and get them to review them. And again, we'll talk about how that then relates to kind of what you would be looking potentially to do in an advertising or promotion sense, because there's some sensitivities in there that we need to be able to manage here. And I'll talk about some of the ethical and legal considerations in just a moment. But just as an overarching kind of role here, product reviewer could be very, very interesting for you. And also the final one on my little list of top 6 key roles for a marketing influencer working with you could be event promoter. So if you have particular initiatives, workshops, conferences, events, and you need to get, sort of people into the room or onto the screen, they can often be really good evangelists for the events and the activities or things that you've got coming up. And obviously they are a route in, a very, very strong and trustworthy channel into the sectors that you may well be wanting to engage with. So there's lots of good reasons there, lots of good things that can open up an opportunity here. So it isn't just about, pushing a message out through them and hoping that the audience listens. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of almost build them into your marketing thinking and some of the longer term marketing strategies. So the most effective kind of viewpoint at this stage then is to be thinking of them as trusted partners, trusted allies from a strategic perspective. So don't just think about marketing influencers from just a tactical, I'm going to run some campaigns, quick hit, in we go, do the work, and then just disappear. Think of this potentially as a long-term relationship, because the influencer themselves will feel more valued and certainly more significant in your plans if you treat them in that way. And again, you do get what you give. So there's a lot of really good stuff and opportunity there. So thinking of that in a kind of almost a promotional sense then instantly opens up the debate about ethical and legal considerations. Now, in influencer marketing right now, there are a lot of potential pitfalls here, and I want to kind of just list these out for you so that if you do start to put together some influencer marketing plans, that almost like the checklist of things you've got to watch out for. So the first thing is around disclosure and transparency. So influencers really must disclose the partnerships that they have with brands very, very clearly. So for example, using a hashtag like hashtag ad or hashtag sponsored or hashtag partner to indicate that this is sponsored content. Okay, so if in doubt, disclose it and be transparent. And, you need to really sort of agree those terms and conditions as part of the contract. I'll talk about contracts in just a minute, but that's a really, really key one. That's really, really important. Also, it's about kind of following guidelines, really, if you like, that are kind of set by any regulatory bodies. So if you're in the States, you'd be following the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission regulations. If you're in the UK or in Europe, you're looking at both GDPR and ASA in the UK, Advertising Standards Authority. And you do need to ensure that you comply with any advertising codes and any disclosure requirements for the countries in which you're operating. And of course, if we're working here at either a national or a sector level, you will know where those will apply, because you're looking at almost a captive audience for the community that you're operating in. So that's a really, really key one. So you need to be doing that. When it comes to things like the kind of honesty and sort of sharing, if you like, of opinions about products and services, you really do need, as a brand owner or as a marketer, to be encouraging the influencer to share honest opinions, okay, because they need to be making sure at every step that they are not looking as though they're coerced into saying certain things by you. So allowing some flexibility for things not to be seen as a 5-star review, for example. And sometimes you are going to have to take a bit of a hit here, because it might be that the actual influencer maybe does a scathing review as part of an overall partnership with you. And you sit there thinking, hold on a minute, I'm giving you all these products and services to review. I wasn't expecting that. Well, this is kind of part of the deal. So it is about an honest and authentic relationship, because they need to maintain credibility with their audience. If anybody smells a rat in this relationship at all, the whole thing will tumble like a pack of cards falling. So you have to make sure that you are very, very open, honest, transparent, and credible at all times. This is absolutely key in this whole thing. As is the concept of intellectual property rights. Now, you've got to ensure, as you go through kind of negotiating who's going to do what, how you're going to sort of form this contract, that influencers have the necessary permission to use materials that you have, and particularly if these are copyrighted materials such as music or images or video clips, for example, in their content. So if you own the IP, you own the license for those materials, you need to, as part of the contract, grant those IP rights to the influencer to be able to reuse them. It is not good enough just to say, oh yeah, we just gave you verbal permission. You've got to put this stuff in writing. And consequently, as well, is you need to be double checking and getting in writing as part of the contract that the influencer is using materials and assets that they also have the IP or the license to use. So if you're looking at some of their sort of production materials and you're thinking, hold on a minute, do you actually have the license for that video? Do you actually are you properly licensed with that music that you're putting alongside this review? If the question is not answered clearly, then you don't go there, because your brand associated with some materials that have not been correctly licensed will bring you into the mix. Okay, so you want to make sure that you establish a very clear agreement on who owns the content, who's going to be creating the content during the campaign, who's got the IP, who's got the licensing. So go down at a granular level of detail, negotiate where you need to, but make sure it's clear and written. Next thing I want you to think about as well is kind of, building on from that is certainly things like data privacy and protection. Got to be very mindful of any privacy laws that apply. If you're in the EU or in the UK, you're going to be looking at the GDPR regulations, the General Data Protection regulations there, and ensure that any influencers you work with are aware of and are complying with these things. So any data that's collected during the campaign obviously needs to be held responsible. You need to negotiate who is holding this data, who, if, for example, the reviews that your influencer is doing, if that leads on then to some lead generation activity or some, signing up or subscribing to something, who's going to own that? Who owns that relationship? So you need to contractually make sure that you've, stated that in any kind of agreement that you have with them. We've talked a little bit about the kind of the truth and the transparency thing. Make sure that, any claims are being made that aren't false or misleading. The influencer has to be very, very aware of any claims they make about the product or service, because, this could potentially damage your brand, and worse, could result in some legal repercussions. So you need to be very careful by monitoring really the influencer content to ensure that ensure really that it does align with your brand values and maintains accuracy at all times. So kind of building on all these things, then you need to be establishing a clear contract. Okay, so this is a clear written agreement with the influencer outlining all of the terms of the partnership, including obviously things like compensation, any content requirements, things like deadlines, but also some of these ownership and legislation rights that we've been talking about. And ensure that both parties really, you and them, understand and agree to the terms of the contract in advance of doing any activity, because this will avoid any future misunderstandings or any kind of legal disputes. And you've got to be really clear about this up front. It's very, very easy to get excited by things like influencer marketing because you can see, the potential upside of this, but you have to do due diligence at the outset. So you've got to get these contracts in place before you do anything, just to really protect you and to protect them as well. So both parties are going to be feeling that, there's fair, sort of situation that you've been crafting here. And that also comes to any kind of compensation that you agree. So compensating your influencer fairly and transparently. And of course, this will be based on their reach and their engagement and the value they bring to your campaign. So if it's very, very light touch, maybe just a single review, then that's at one level. But if you're looking to get into a longer term partnership, then be very, very clear that, this is probably their job too. So, if they're providing you with a lot of value, then there is a need to have a sensible and fair compensation back in their direction. Now, you could agree that this is done on a results basis if they're happy with that, or it may well be that it's done on a fixed fee for the number of posts or the amount of engagement. So you can agree that, but agree it in advance. No kind of gray areas. This has to be very, very black and white. So part of that contract. And one of the interesting things which is now coming into the whole influencer marketing debate is kind of who should you be working with? And I'm going to talk about in just a minute how you find appropriate influencers, the kind of tools and platforms that are available. But also really interestingly, there is this kind of current debate going on about, working with a diverse group of influencers to promote your brand. So ensuring a really, really good representation of various demographics, backgrounds, and perspectives, really to avoid any sort of harmful stereotyping or any sort of engaging in tokenism, when selecting influencers for your campaign. So anything that you would be doing in a normal kind of promotional advertising perspective, that should also then apply to your influencer marketing. So as diverse as you can is certainly a really good sort of rule of thumb as you go forward to planning that. So those are some of the things really to think about contractually to kind of set up the initial kind of agreements and engagement with your influencer. But then how do you then, if you've kind of sort of put this thing together, how do you then start to kind of find and manage and work with influencers? Well, there's an increasing number of marketing tools and platforms available to you. I'm just going to list out a few for you just to give you a little bit of a flavor, but you only have to do a search for yourself and you will find there are literally hundreds upon hundreds of both well-established and also new to the market tools and platforms available to you. So just to give you a flavor of some of these, Upfluence actually is a relatively comprehensive influencer marketing platform, and through that you can search for influencers across various kind of social media channels. You can analyze their profiles, you can manage campaigns, and also track performance. Aspire IQ is another interesting one, and this one's really focused on doing some of that stuff, but also focused on building and managing the relationships with the influencers. So So it helps you to manage collaborations, and it's got some quite strong campaign analytics and reporting features. So you can work really in collaboration and kind of grow the relationship together. Heapsy is another one, which is an influencer search and analysis tool. It enables you to find influencers based on various criteria, such as the kind of the niche or the sector, maybe the location. You can also sort of track people down based on engagement rate, not just follower count. Got to be careful not just to get swept along by, oh, they've got a big following, but it's also about engagement rate. So Heapsy is quite a good one there, that gives you some really in-depth analytics on some of the profiles of the influencers who you might be considering. Tracker's a good one for building, again, the relationship management sort of with the influencer, not only kind of in the initial discovery, but also performance tracking. So it's got a number of tools and sort of objectives in there that allow you to identify and manage and measure the ROI of the campaigns that you do. So if you're very much about reporting of the success of your influencer marketing activities, then Tracker is a good one to think about. Clear is another one which has got a strong focus on analytics. It allows you to discover the influencers. You can analyze their audience demographics, and also generate reports. So again, if reporting is a good one for you, then Clear is a good one, K-L-E-A-R, as is Creator IQ. Now this one's a bit of a higher level one, so you might be sort of looking at this one if you've got some bigger budgets, and this is more of a sort of corporate enterprise level marketing platform, but is really, really good for performance tracking, and offers some real deep dive advanced analytics and data-driven insights that allow you to manage your influencer marketing campaigns into the future. And so they go on, and so they go on. So there's a whole range of different other options as well. Social Bakers, Brandwatch, BuzzSumo, Ninja Outreach, the list continues on. So what I recommend you do is, if you're thinking about exploring this, is have a little play with some of these on the list that I've just given you, and have a little play with the initial discovery, and go beyond just purely following by social media. You need to be looking at ones that will enable you to see much more the engagement and the kind of the community element within the profiles that you're looking for. So don't just get swept along by the vanity metric of, number of followers. Have a look at actually what's going on, how engaged the influencers are, the ones that you've spotted. And then when you found a few, it's a time then really to start thinking about, how am I going to select the right ones? Well, for me, there's kind of 4 criteria when it comes to maybe narrowing down a dozen. So, using these tools, you might have highlighted maybe a dozen influencers, and you really want to focus down on maybe 2 or 3. So there's 4 kind of criteria for me for selecting the right influencers. Okay, the first one is reach. So they have to be able to reach, not just in scale, but in targeting. They have to be able to reach the audience that you want to be reaching. Okay, so you've got to look back at yourself and think, okay, is their demographic the same one that we are looking to get to? So look at their target personas, the people they're engaging with. Is that the persona you're looking to reach? Then it's about the relevance. Are the kinds of things that they are talking about and engaging on the kinds of things that are going to relate to the product, service, or messages that your brand is going to put into this marketplace? Because it's all very well having an influencer who's got the reach and the credibility, but if you're not in alignment with both the style, but also the kind of messages and maybe the thought leadership this influencer has in their market, in their sector, in their community, then you're going to miss a mark. Okay, so the relevance is key as well. As is the resonance. You've got to feel like this is somebody you could work with. If the tone of voice and the style is out of kilter with your brand guidelines, then this is not somebody you can work with. So the resonance is got to be strong. So you're looking at reach, relevance, resonance, again, alignment with your brand style. And then the 4th one in the list is engagement. How, when you initially engage with them, do they come across? What's your initial kind of feeling when you have that first connection? If you jump onto a Teams or a Zoom call and have a chat, or if you're engaging through some sort of chat mechanism or through email, kind of, are you lifted when you see their message? Are you lifted in those interactions? Does it feel like a fit? If you're having to force it, or if it feels like pushing water uphill, then the engagement isn't potentially there for you. So if you look at reach, relevance, resonance, and engagement, you should get a really nice rounded sense of the next step as to whether this person or whether this particular influencer is going to be, related to the kind of thing that you're going to be looking to do. And that's really important. So just because they score highly on the numbers game, and so they've got the quantity and they've clearly got the access to the people you want, it's still got to, from a subjective perspective, it's still got to fit with you personally, but also with you as a brand, because this is a relationship, as I said at the outset, that you're looking to build here, not a one-time hit. Strong influencer marketing is all about building a longer term relationship. So it's got to work for both parties. So you've found some, you've identified them, you've now narrowed it down to you've got your wish list of who you want to work with. So where do you go next? Well, it's about creating an effective influencer marketing strategy. Now, with my definition of strategy, that is the longer term view. Okay, so we are looking here at a strategy, not tactics at this stage. The tactics is kind of what you're going to do in a practical sense to get this thing moving forward. But the influencer marketing strategy is at a higher level. It's a longer term view over the kind of engagement, the reasons why, and some of the targeting that you're going to be looking to do in the coming months and years. So the first point here is to set some clear, smart goals and objectives, much as you would with any other marketing activity. Again, there's a real danger. You just get swept along by the excitement of working with an influencer who can tap into, a particular community you've been always longing to get your products and services into. But you've got to do the due diligence as much as doing the contract. You've got to set up your strategy. So setting clear, smart goals and objectives at the outset is key. And of course, sharing those with the influencer to get their feedback. Do they think they can actually achieve these things with you? What do they need to be able to deliver on these goals? Because, in terms of key performance indicators, you're going to be all over them. So they've got to feel comfortable that they can actually act and operate within the goals that you're setting. Second point on your influencer marketing strategy is your target audience and any kind of segmentation. Now, I would be breaking this right down to the level of customer persona. Okay, so yes, some high-level demographic information, age, profile, location, socioeconomic group, etc., all of those high-level things. But let's get down to persona level. Who are the actual individuals? How can you describe them? Really, what do they look like? What are they wearing? Where do they go on holiday? What media do they consume? Really getting to the heart of the individual. So the word is clear here. It's persona. And again, bouncing this off your influencer, do they feel this is the kind of person that they're actually communicating with? Is this something you've got to develop together? Potentially it is. And that could be really strong, because then if you're both working from this common persona, then, having that language of, okay, it's Bob, we'll just call Bob, just made that up. But, if Bob is your persona, they'll understand who Bob is, you'll understand who Bob is, and you can then actually have some really tangible conversations. Because if you're talking marketing speak and they're coming at it from their community perspective, you could mismatch their abilities to deliver what you require. So it's really important, again, working collaboratively. Third point on your influencer marketing strategy is creating a content plan. There's going to be something produced here. So your content plan, I would suggest, is all about the rule of thirds. So actually balancing what you're going to be sort of working with. So 1/3 is about getting to know you as a brand. So your influencer actually helping to shape the narrative to introduce, the personality and the personas within your brand. So they get to know who you are and why you're relevant for that community. Second is very much sharing the value you're going to be bringing. So the point. So, what kinds of messages do you need to be associating with? What kinds of sort of third-party content data could you bring into the mix here? And then, of course, the final third is the promote. third in the rule of thirds. So yes, products and services that you want to introduce. And of course, that's all about leveraging the outputs and the outcomes. It's not just features and benefits of, oh, here's a nice unpackaging of this particular product. It's kind of, yeah, but what does this mean for the community? What does this mean if they actually sign up to this thing? How's their life going to be different? So where's the real value output? That's key in creating your content plan. And again, doing it collaboratively with the influencer, so they can say, yeah, well, that doesn't really sort of resonate actually with my audience, but this bit over here does. And I'd recommend if we're doing it this way, this is the social network that I go through and do. So you can have those kinds of conversations. So your influencer marketing strategy at a content plan level starts to drive the tactical activity that sits underneath it. So the fourth point on your influencer marketing strategy is aligning the influencer marketing with your overall marketing strategy. Last thing you want to be doing is operating this influencer plan outside of your overall marketing strategy. So you need to be able to integrate it in with the other things that you're doing, and both from a timeliness perspective, but also from a consistency of message, because undoubtedly, if people are interested, so this influencer's audience, this will create a bit of a buzz, bit of a conversation, and people will come to your website, they'll come onto your social accounts, they'll possibly pick up the phone, they'll want to engage with you to find out more, to get that product or to get that service for themselves. And of course, if they do, they need to see some consistency in the journey. So linking your influencer marketing with the overall customer journey of people just like them is vital. You don't want them going down some dead-end alley, so they get to this point and they've clicked on it and they get to the point and it's like, oh, okay, was that it? Well, I wanted the product or service, but I can't see how I get it, would be the worst outcome, because then your objectives are not going to be met. So integrating your influencer marketing as part of your customer persona's overall journey, as part of your wider marketing strategy, is key. And if you haven't done that activity, plotting the customer's journey of customers just like them, then it's time to do that in advance. Probably do that first before you do your influencer marketing, because you want to reverse engineer this back into your overall marketing plans. And that brings me on to point 5, which is setting and managing budgets. So having, as part of the agreement of the actual marketing sort of planning, an agreement of the collaboration and the contract you've set with your influencer, you need to make sure that you've got appropriate budgets in place. Now, this might not be big upfront fees and things like that. It could be a rolling or sliding scale, but knowing that you've got the budgets there available and protecting them. Remember, this is a supplier in your sort of marketing mix here. So really ring fencing any budget and making sure that that budget is pre-signed off before you start your influencer marketing tactical activities, because the last thing, the most embarrassing thing would be to, for reasons outside of your control, have any budget, pulled away from you. And then, of course, then you have to let your influencer down. And then, of course, that relationship then is potentially gone. So it's really important that you ring fence and protect any budget for this particular strategy or tactical activities. And the final point, point 6, is about the measurement and evaluation of the success of your influencer marketing campaigns that roll out of your strategy. So your key performance indicators, get these agreed with the influencer or influencers in advance, so they know what they're going to be rated on. It may or may not be performance driven, so maybe they're going to get paid anyway, or that they're going to be rewarded appropriately anyway. But even so, they need to know that, you are watching the success of these campaigns and that you're all over it, so that it keeps them, on the straight and narrow. They're going to report back how it's going from their perspective, but you are also, because you've got the tools and you've got the platforms all set up ready before this thing kicks off, they know that you're going to be watching. And that's really, really key here. Not that you're watching over them to kind of like police it at a nth degree, but that you're going to be here, really supportive, but you are here in a serious, influencer marketing strategic way. So you're not just, just flying in the face of the wind and hoping this thing's going to work. And no, you're actually here to deliver this on a proper, tangible basis. And again, those kinds of approaches, just even as a mindset, allows you to manage your influencer influencer marketing in a really kind of highly professional way. The influencer possibly maybe hasn't actually encountered a marketer who's managing it in this way before. So this will give them a lot of confidence that you really know your stuff. So they've got their contract, they're going to be rewarded for their activities and stuff, and then they're actually going to be measured in an appropriate way. So it just gives everybody just a really nice kind of sense of control, management, professionalism. And then hopefully then you will fall into the a range of different great influencer marketing brand examples. Just got a few that are worth you just going having a little look at. So if you do a search on some of these names, you will find a whole host of really, really interesting examples of influencer marketing. So Daniel Wellington, the watch brand, they've been sort of well known to sort of use influencer marketing to really sort of grow rapidly in certain sectors, and particularly through Instagram. They've done a lot of work with Instagram, and have amassed huge followings and increased sales and stuff. So there's a lot of sort of very, very clear calls to action from some of the sponsored posts that they've done with their influencers. Glossier is a beauty and skincare brand. They've now managed to create, using influencer marketing, a very loyal customer base. They are working specifically with micro-influencers and also real customers, which is interesting. Now, you could say that they're either micro-influencers or nano-influencers, but they get really down and specific. So they have a lot of influencers that they're working with, and it really is a fundamental part of their marketing planning. And of course, that in itself, because it's down at that kind of micro or nano level, it allows the brand to build trust and credibility with the audience. Bigger brands that I'm sure you've seen some of this stuff sort of in the media. So Gymshark is, fitness apparel brand, and they've done a lot of work strategically partnering in the longer term with fitness influencers. So they know their audience, they know who the influencers are. So, a lot of these are fitness trainers who are sharing workout tips and routines, transformations, etc. And so they've been using, those influencers to really generate a buzz and build a real strong community around their brand. Audible is another really good example, very different to the ones above, but they've been using micro-influencers to share personal stories about how Audible has benefited the YouTubers who are their influencers. So they've kind of, again, crossed over in digital channels here, and again, very, very targeted within YouTube. And so we're seeing here certain brands really, really stealing, some really, really great gains from very specific social networks. So influencers in very particular platforms. HelloFresh, though, is one that's kind of bucked the trend, really, which is a meal kit delivery service. And they've been collaborating with influencers across a whole host of different platforms, Instagram, YouTube, and others. And really what they're doing is they're showcasing the recipes the service offers. So it's almost like they're developing sort of cook along with your favorite influencer kind of approach. So there's a lot of video used here, obviously Instagram, YouTube. But again, using, multiple different platforms, but integrating the product or service and the actual experience of using the product or service within the influencers' communities. So reaching, very, very wide audiences and increasing customer acquisition in that way. And many, many other examples as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on. This, you will not be alone if you go down the route of influencer marketing. The nice thing about these examples, though, are that these are very much around micro influencer. So they're not necessarily going after the mega influencers. Much bigger budget here. They're looking at this on a very sort of strategically micro influencer level, and of course a lot of these brands you'll be very familiar with. So it's showing that a lot of the big brands are doing this stuff very, very well. So if you are currently at this point thinking, this all sounds really good, I might kind of use some of these tools and platforms to give this a go, then I would say, great, go for it. but start carefully, okay? And I would like to just identify the 5 common pitfalls that most people stumble upon very early on in their influencer marketing planning journey. So the first one is choosing influencers based on follower count alone. It's very, very, very tempting because you think, oh, they've got a big following, they're going to be good. That isn't necessarily the only measure, as we've seen already. So following, yes, you need the reach, but it is about some of those other points that I mentioned earlier, the resonance and the relevance of the particular influencer as well. So look at style and tone of voice, and again, look for brand alignment. Another common pitfall is lack of clear goals and objectives. A lot of marketers just jump straight into this and think, well, I need to be doing it because it sounds good. It's about influencers. Therefore, it's a current trending sort of topic. So I've got to be doing it. And then they don't think through it in the same way they would if it was a more traditional channel or a more traditional approach to marketing where, setting clear goals and objectives would be the nature of it. So, the traditional way that you do good marketing still applies, even though it's influencer marketing. Okay, so don't just get swept along by the creative and the assets and the relationship. Those are all important, but it's really important to remember you've got to set some very smart goals as well and measure them. Another pitfall as well is insufficient research and vetting. Spend quality time filtering people out. It's very, very tempting, as I said earlier, to go for some of the bigger names, the bigger numbers, the bigger followings. But do your research. Really be, brutal in terms of the way that you're filtering out the potential influencers you could work with. And often, if this is your first few steps into influencer marketing, it could potentially be safer going for a friendly or two. So people you might already know, even if they're kind of nano influencers, and you think, well, we need to kind of create and set up a best practice way of doing this. And then once we've got that established, we've got our framework, we've got our template, if you like, and then we're going to start to go out to some of the micro influencers and maybe even up to a macro influencer if that's relevant to you. So do your research at the start and start safe, start small. Another common pitfall once you actually get going and publishing stuff is to overly control the content. Do remember that it is all about allowing the influencer to do their thing, okay? So, if you think, well, it's our brand, it's our product, it's our service, then you're missing the essence of what influencer marketing is. It is a relationship into which you're fueling products and services and messages and opportunities, but then you're allowing the influencer to do their thing with their community. So trust comes into this at the outset. Okay, once you've established that relationship, you've got the contract in place, you've agreed the smart goals, you know where you're going, allow the influencer to do their thing. And if you don't feel that that's appropriate, or you've got people breathing down your neck in your organization saying, can't do that, you can't give that away, you can't do that, then it might be too early to be doing influencer marketing. Okay, because you have to, resist the urge to overly control your content. This is about them kind of doing this for themselves. And the final common pitfall is inadequate measurement and tracking. You have to be all over this like a rash. You really, really do, because this is about continuous improvement. The chances of the very first review going viral, making it, your brand just suddenly, going to the stratosphere and back is very, very unlikely. This is probably something that organically you are going to build over time. And you're only going to be able to do that if you adequately measure and track the progress that you're taking. So be prepared to be patient. Influencer marketing is not an overnight success story, even if you're parting with big bucks in your budget here and you're paying a lot of money for your influencers. This is about a slow burn. Okay, so be patient, but make sure that you're measuring, tracking, so you can continuously improve every single time something moves, every single time something gets published, every single time there's a conversation or your influencer does something. Know what happened and why. So it's about gathering the insights, but also then evaluating. So getting in place some regular reviews with them. Don't just let them disappear into the sunset with all your products and services, and then you think, oh, what happened there? Lost it completely. Is having regular reviews and catch-ups, evaluating what you're going to do next. Continuous improvement is the real flavor of the day when it comes to doing this right. So I'd strongly recommend that you do that as well. So those are typically the 5 most common pitfalls. Obviously, you'll find others, I'm sure, as you go through this, but it's really important to know that that those are the key ones that you need to just sort of come through. So just to kind of sum things up and round everything off, hopefully this has been tempting enough for you to go and explore using some of those tools and platforms. But, you know, the most significant benefit really of influencer marketing is the ability to build some trust and credibility within potentially a new target audience. You know, the influencers themselves have already got these established relationships with their followers, and they are going to see them as authentic, knowledgeable and relatable. So this is what you can then piggyback on. And that's the key with influencer marketing, is trusting your influencer to kind of take the message in an appropriate way back to their audience. And of course, when influencers endorse or recommend a product or service, their followers are more likely to trust the recommendation because they already know and trust the influencer. And that is the key. And that's the definition of influencer. So, you know, this is not rocket science. It is quite straightforward and simple. And the trust, of course, that happens there can lead to increasing brand awareness, getting your messages out there. Ultimately, if you plan this right and comes back to that customer journey again, the higher conversion rates. And ultimately, if this is a long-term relationship that you're building with your influencer or influencers, then ultimately, hopefully, in those communities, establishing more loyal customers as well. So hopefully that is something that's going to be of interest to you. So I wish you every success. Use that little list of tools and platforms, hopefully to get yourself started on there. Go and have a little look and explore, but be very, very clear at the outset. Do your planning first as to which communities do we want to get into so that you know the niche or the sector that you're after. Start nano or start micro. It's the best place to start because it's specific and it's very targeted. You might want to go macro in the future, but start in a more controlled, more measurable way. And I'm sure you'll get a lot of success through this approach. And of course, if all else fails, you know, you can go to the very, very nano approach, which is the people literally sat next to you in your business, or the very, very trusted family and friends around you, because after all, potentially they're influencers too. So the concept of influencer marketing is very varied, but if you follow, hopefully, some of these top tips and some of these approaches, you can increase your brand awareness, you can improve your conversion rates, and hopefully you're going to generate some really, really great return on investment in your activities. So I wish you every success, and hopefully influencer marketing can be part of your marketing strategy going forward. Have a great rest of your day and very best of luck.